How you doing today, Rick?
I'm doing good, Kevin. How are you doing?
Good. I'm glad we're doing this, man. I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah, me too. Me too. So it's really not a very good weather day outside right now, so it's perfect to sit inside and talk about knives
So
and
where are you guys located?
we're in northeast Ohio.
Okay.
If you take and go 50 miles south of Cleveland, 50 miles north east of Columbus, we're right in that quadrant.
Is that where you grew up?
No, actually, I grew up everywhere. My parents moved around a lot, and so I graduated from a small high school, small town in east southeastern Ohio called Amanda Clear Creek is where I graduated from, and I was there probably 2 years, and I had lived everywhere from Tennessee, Wisconsin, mostly in Ohio, but yeah, pretty much everywhere.
So what did you do after high school?
After high school, I went. That's what brought me to Worcester, where I'm at right now. I went to a branch of Ohio State University called Agricultural Technical Institute, ATI, and I went there in horses. So I was a horse trainer and
Wow.
farrier. That was actually I started training horses before I graduated high school, but I went to ATI to kind of further, get a degree. I thought that would give me better chances on some better farms for training, and ended up meeting my wife while I was here at ATI in Worcester. She was in horse. Her parents owned a quarter horse breeding operation, and I started training horses out of their barn. And of course, met my wife, and we got married, and I've stayed here. Sprouted roots here, and the roots are very deep.
Oh,
I
that's
after I left home, I thought, I am not moving. I'm not. I'm staying right here. I've had
good for
enough of
you.
my moving when I was a kid.
Nice. Yeah. No, I can imagine that much moving would set it in your mind. These
But
roots
yeah,
are gonna go deep.
yeah, I got really good at making friends, new friends and stuff because
Nice.
literally, when we moved from Wisconsin back to Ohio, when I left school that day, I had no idea that we were moving back to Ohio. So literally, it was that quick. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. Yeah. We had the guy that my dad used to work for. He took my books and stuff back to school, and yeah, those kids probably were like, "Whatever happened to that Rick Hinderer guy?" So
So
yeah,
I understand the logo now. That there's a horse in it. That's pretty cool.
yes, yes, that's what. Because I love horses. I'm a horseman. And being that that's what I started when I had the logo designed, I wanted to input what I did and my love of horses and what I used to do with training and shoeing, and then the the main is like flames, and that is my association. I was a volunteer firefighter and EMT for almost 11 years. And so we put both of those together. And now that I'm back into horses, we got back into horses about 3 years ago, my wife and I. And so a lot of people like online, they're seeing pictures of me on horseback and stuff, and they're like, now we get it. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
So when were you EMT? Because I know that influences your knife making.
Yes, yes. So I I joined the fire department. Actually, I joined the underwater search and rescue unit a year before I actually joined the fire department. Even though that organization was part of the fire department that I was with, and I joined them in 1996. And then a year later, my wife, she was also on the underwater search and rescue team as well as the fire department. So it's kind of neat. She joined the fire department first and became a firefighter and EMT.
So you
I
guys
was,
were already married at that point.
yeah, oh yeah, yeah. We had already been
Okay.
married. We were married in 1987,
Okay.
86. I'm sorry, I better get that right.
Oh
And
yeah, yeah. Don't mess that one up. Yeah.
and so then she had joined the fire department, and so she was a firefighter EMT. I was a diver, and we kind of switched. So she joined the dive team a year later, and I joined the fire department a year later. And so we were both on the fire department at the same time for about 10 years.
So for that decade plus period, were you already making knives?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I was already making knives. When I started making knives, it was actually like the very first knife I made. And it's like, why did I, the question is, why do I get into making knives? And it was, I'd always been, my mom was really taught us kids, there was 4 of us, the arts and crafts. She was very crafty. She was always making stuff, and she imparted that into us kids. And so I was already, if I needed anything, I just made it. When I was a kid, if I wanted a toy, we weren't very, we were kind of poor when growing up. So if I wanted a toy, I just made it. And so it was nothing for me. I didn't have that. Well, how do I do this? I would just make something, and I wanted to give a knife to a buddy of mine that was retiring from the military, from the special forces, and so I didn't have any money, didn't have enough money to buy him a knife. So I thought, well, I'll make him one. And by then I was already shoeing horses, so I was making horseshoes, for horses. So I was forging already. I had already had that forging influence. So I pounded a knife out of a plow point, and I forged it and finished it kind of quasi. Now this was back in the 1980s, so we didn't have the internet. We didn't have all that work. I could just Google how do you make a knife, kind of deal. So it was like, well, I just did what I thought was right, and I didn't even know that there was really a custom knife making thing. So I made this knife and I gave it to him, and I thought, why now? That was because I've always been into knives, and guns, and I was like a farm kid growing up. So I thought, man, that was fun. I'm gonna make another one. So I made another one, and then I just got that bug, and again, it was partly the craftsmanship. I have to make things. I mean, that's just it's in me, and so I just kept making I'd make another knife, and I'd make another knife, and it just kept, and then I would show these knives to my training customers and my shoeing customers, and wow, that's pretty cool. And then that's where my first sales came from. And what's kind of funny is, like, I don't know if they bought them because they wanted to make sure that I kept coming back and shoeing their horses for them, or whether I think they really enjoyed. They like seeing the craftsmanship and everything. But we laugh about that, those first sales.
Does your friend still have the knife?
No, he doesn't. But I know where the knife is at. And
have you seen it since then?
Yeah, I've seen it, and it's in this fellow's collection, and
Nice.
It's pretty cool. But I do have the second knife that I made.
Okay.
And I look back at some of those early knives, and with what I had and the equipment that I had. Again, I didn't have any money back then, and so it's like, well, how do you make a knife if you don't have, nowadays, especially a knife maker getting started, you go out and you buy a 2x72 belt grinder or whatever to grind the blades, and all you have to do is just hop online and you have all of this available to you. Well, back then, and again, I don't mean to keep going, like, I had to go to school 3 miles, walk 3 miles, uphill, both going to school and coming home from school, the usual old fart thing. But literally back then, there wasn't a lot of this. You had to kind of come up with, okay, this is what I want to do. Now, how am I going to do it? Or what am I going to get to? Like grinding the edge bevels on a blade. Instead of like, I'll buy a 2x72 belt grinder. I found a washing machine motor, and I put a disc sander on it and modified it, and that was my first grinder. I mean, it took me forever to grind edge bevels on a blade, let me tell you. And but that's what I had, and when I get that question a lot from guys, young guys that want to start making knives, and well, what do I need? And I was like, well, you can, if you have enough in you, if you really believe you want to do this, you want to make something, you will find a way to do it. I mean, even if you just take a file and file the edge bevels, you'll find a way to do it. You don't need the big technology things or anything like that. So
I like that. I just did a story. I think it was on Browning, John Moses Browning, and he would take scraps from his dad's scrapyard and assemble. So it's like the spirit of getting down, the ability to invent, to create with your hands. That's the important part that you need.
Yes, and that is something that's in you. It's like, to me, it's breathing. If I'm not creating, if I'm not making something, I'm not breathing. I'm suffocating. I have to be able to do that. And I know, and yeah, with John Moses Browning, he's one of my heroes. And I believe he forged the first, the M2, the different parts of the receiver. He actually, on an anvil.
Wow.
Wow.
Incredible.
Yeah. But yeah, that's that spirit. That's one of those things that is, I don't know where it comes from. It comes from God. Is really where it comes from. He gave me this ability to be able to come up with things that have an edge. So I don't know. I was listening to an interview with I forgot his name, lead singer of Metallica.
Oh, not Lars.
No, not Lars.
Or James
Hetfield.
Yeah, James Hetfield.
Yeah, and
these guys are awesome, by the way.
Yeah, I was out thumbing through Facebook or something, and the interview asked him, it's like, these songs, the lyrics, where does it come from? And he was like, man, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's there, and I'm like, that's just like my designs and stuff that I have done over the years, where it's just there. It just comes to me, and it's not the best way to, as an example of, instead of like, okay, I'll sit down and I'll draw something. It's lyrics. It's, writing a book in 2 days, a novel, it just comes to you.
That's so cool. Because I never made this. I love knives. I've always collected knives, and at some point it kind of happened to me as well, where I was like, I want to write about this. I want to write these stories, and I never made this connection to like the work of the hands physically with making knives to what I do. Because that what you described is very much how I feel as well. I don't know where it comes from. I'm definitely answering to something much bigger than I am.
Right.
And I feel very blessed that I get to practice it. But it can also be pretty frustrating.
Right. And that's just it. It's something that it's not a forced thing. It's there or it's not there. And that's something that's really hard to explain to somebody. Some people know it. You hear a writer's block, and that's one of them things where if you force it, it doesn't come. It just has to come. And sometimes it comes at 2 a.m. or 3 a.m.
That's it. That's it. Yeah. Like, I just want to sleep.
Yeah, write this down real quick. I'm afraid it'll go away. I'm later, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I think this will work. And I've actually proofed out mechanisms in my head.
Wow.
And
so
then
sorry, go ahead.
No, my wife calls it the 1,000-yard stare, because I'll just be like, just looking, and she'll be asking me, she's like, what's wrong? And then she remembers, she goes, oh, that's right, you're thinking about a knife. I'm like, yeah, sorry.
That's amazing. So you can diagram it in your mind.
Yes, absolutely. It completely starts there. A lot of times I won't even put it to paper until I'm sitting and I'm thinking about it.
Okay.
And I'm thinking about different lines, of a knife, and especially mechanisms, things like that. How can I improve this, or what can I do here? And I'll go through my mind on exactly before I actually put it to paper, because I'm not sure really what I should write down on paper until it goes over in my mind. And different designs were affected by different things, and then some just come to me. Yeah, it's again, it's hard to explain. It's like, oh wow, that would be kind of cool.
I could see that. I'm going to go ahead and pull out the knives because I have a question about this little divot
Yeah,
right there.
yeah, the cutout for the lock.
Ah, so
Yeah. So
what's the purpose for that?
the purpose is, if you think about it, you look at that. If that was full thickness, that
Yeah.
is a spring. That lock there, that lever, it's a spring. So if that was full thickness, it would be so hard for that to move over that you would never. You might be able to get it to lock, but you would never be able to get it to unlock. So you
Wow.
you relieve that material. That titanium is 6L4V titanium, which is a hardened titanium, and it acts as a spring. So you have to be able to take some of that material away so that you can be able to actually use it as a spring.
Does that also help with weight?
No, no, it's not
Okay.
really done to alleviate weight. It's really done 100% just to be able to make that to where it's actually a usable spring.
Everybody I've been showing these knives to who didn't already know about them,
Uh huh.
just comments on. I mean, they always say. My friend yesterday, I showed him this one,
Okay,
and
yeah.
he said, "Oh, that's a nice stabby pokey."
Yeah, 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 yeah.
uh,
I've heard the stabby pokey thing.
but they always comment on how light your knives are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Uh, how do you accomplish that?
Well, a lot of that is the materials that we use. Number one, again, the lock side is titanium. So
Okay.
titanium is a lighter metal than if it was steel. So that takes a lot of weight out of it. And when I design a knife and engineer a knife, I think of the weight in the knife. I want it to be, so I design the knife particularly not only not only for ergonomics, the way it fits in your hand. I'm a big proponent, and a lot of this is my usage of a knife,
Yeah.
especially when I was on the fire department and things like that. Now, that being said, you don't firefighters don't use a knife every day on the fire department. Actually, very seldom that you actually have to use a knife. But when you do have to use a knife, it better perform.
Yeah.
Um, so, so a lot of that, one of my philosophies on a knife is a tool. Number one, it's a tool. And if you're using a tool, you don't want that tool to be working against you. In other words, it's an extension of your hand, it's an extension of your arm. And if it's bulky, if it's heavy, if it's ergonomically not comfortable in the hand, in other words, you get hot spots when you go to work with it, it's not it's not making your job easier. So when I design a knife, especially all of those factors come in mind. Is it comfortable to hold? Make sure there's no hot spots, the ergonomics, the lines of the knife, how it fits in your hand, the angle of the blade in your hand when you're working it. Again, you don't want it to work against you. And weight goes a lot into that. You don't want and especially on a folding knife, it's a pocket knife. It goes in your pocket. You don't want a knife that's going to pull your britches down.
Yeah.
Or that's on the extreme end. But on the other end, just being uncomfortable to carry. You don't want a brick in your pocket to where it's uncomfortable to carry it because you're going to be carrying it all day long. So I factor that into my designs. So if there's a way that I can reduce some unnecessary weight in a pocket knife, in a folding knife, and even in a fixed blade, absolutely I'm going to do that. So there you'll see on some of my knives some lightening, some areas usually where you can't see on the inside, where I'll lighten. I make some lightening cuts and stuff like that. And that's not just lightening the knife for the sake of lightening the knife. You also have to have a balance. Again, you want this knife to work for you, not against you. So when you're holding a knife, when you're using it, when you're working with it, you want it to balance properly.
So with the blades, how much does the steel dictate with shape, design, weight, and all that?
The actual steel itself, there's really not that. When I go to, okay, what kind of steel am I going to use for this blade or for this knife? I look at actually a lot of different factors, because steel itself, different types of steel, different grades of steel, will tell you what the knife is going to be used for. Dictates what kind of steel that you're going to use for that. Whether you want extreme edge holding, because there's compromises with steel. You can get steel that has a really extreme edge holding. In other words, very high Rockwell, high hardness. But the problem is now you might be getting into where it's a little bit brittle. So if you go out and you start prying with it, that may not be the best steel. And on the flip side, you can get a steel that is really high in strength, but maybe less in hardness, lower Rockwell. So you're constantly doing a compromise. And so when you're looking at like a folding knife, are you going to be using a folding knife the same that you'd use a fixed blade, or is this fixed blade a camping type knife, to where you're going to be, not only cutting tent stakes, but you may even use a knife as a tent stake. So there's a lot of factors that go into that. A folding knife, I'm going to be using a steel that, number one, is a high hardness, so that we have good edge holding. And also, what grind am I using? My Spanto grind actually is, I'm grinding the blade to match the very high toughness. So I can go up in my hardness, but yet I'm still going to maintain that toughness. In other words, that blade being able to do some prying without snapping. I guess I'm really going off on a tangent here. There's a lot of different factors that go into design. It's not just blade steel. It's not just the overall style of the knife. A lot goes in. What is it going to be used for? So yeah, and a really long answer on that. Blade steel matters, but there's a lot of other factors that go into it.
So another thing, one of my friends was, I don't know a whole lot about knives. I just know I love them. So he was describing the bearings.
Yes.
In there, what's the purpose? Is that where they would be, in there?
Yeah, they're in the inside. The bearings on where the blade actually on a regular without the bearings. And there's a timeline on that. My knives have I came up with what I call a tri-way pivot system, and I designed it to where you can be able to use whether nylon, nylotron washers. In other words, in between, if you notice on the pivot area, there's a gap between the actual steel blade and the titanium handles.
Gotcha.
And that's a 15 thousandths gap on my folders.
Wow.
So in that 15 thousandths, it's got bearings in it right now, but you can put a nylon or a nylotron washer in there instead of the bearing. So the surface of the blade where it meets the titanium, you would have a washer instead of bearings. And then you can also, some users like to put phosphor bronze. And and again, I made it, the reason why I came up with the tri-way system, because you can go either just the nylon bearings or the phosphor bronze bearings, or washers rather, or you could use the bearings. And each one gives you a different feel on the knife. And each system should be thought of on what you're going to be using the knife for, because there's pros and cons of each system. So the bearings obviously make the most, I would say, slick movement in the action. Okay. So, but one of the drawbacks to the bearings is the fact that if you're in a real sandy environment or real dirty environment, well, you can get that in the bearings. Oh. And then you would have an issue. And I'll go into further detail on what you do at that point, and also why I design my knives to be taken apart easy. But if you're working with that knife in an environment, real muddy, like somebody working on a pipeline or something like that, you don't care about how how fast you flick the blade out. You don't
Yeah.
care about whether it's what they call drop shut smooth. You don't care about that. You just want a knife that you can be able to rely on that's going to open and close every time when you're out in that environment. So then you may want to go with the nylon or even the phosphor bronze washers. So instead of having a knife where you can only have one system, I came up with a tri-way system to where you can, when you purchase one of these knives, you can configure it exactly the way you want to configure it based on the conditions that you're going to use this knife for.
And that would factor into like the customizability.
Absolutely.
Because one of my friends said he looked at it and he's like, "You got to take this apart," and I was like, "No, I can't do that." I was like, and just from a knowledge perspective on my part, I didn't want to like mess up this work of art, but
Yeah.
that is a huge part of what you do.
Exactly, exactly, and it's kind of crazy that we actually, where a lot of companies makers like don't take apart our knives. We actually encourage people to take them apart. So much so that we make and sell accessories that you have to take the knife apart to be able to, to actually put them in. Different standoffs, different screw. We have all kinds of different things to make it your own. And how is that possible? And that's really the ticket. Is making it possible to where you can do that. And why did I come up with this? When I first came up with the idea of I want to design this knife, this folding knife, to be able to take it apart and put it back together. Why? That goes back to the fire department, and the need to clean your tool. For some obvious reasons I won't get into. You have to be able to clean it. You have to take it apart to clean it and make sure it's surgically clean. And so that went into, okay, well, I need to design my knife that I'm using to where I can take it apart really easy, clean it, put it back together, and it works the exact same when you put it back together. And the ticket to that is tolerances. To have really high tolerances so that when you take it apart and you put it back together, everything fits like a very precise puzzle, so that then the knife is still going to work exactly the way it did before you actually took it apart. Now, that was the main reason that I engineered and designed my folders that way. Now, the fact that you could be able to customize and make it your own, that came later. That was actually after the afterthought of being able to take the knife apart, put it back together to clean it, field maintenance, stuff like that. Everything that I do, it has a reoccurring theme, and that is the usability of the tool. Now being able to, in the collector market and in the enthusiast, to be able to add jewelry to your knife, that's a really cool portion of it. But that wasn't the main reason that I designed it.
I'm glad you said that because there is also a very artistic element to what you're doing with that customizability.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like these are, well, you could almost call these art knives, really. Is that an accurate description?
Well, yeah, it is, especially if you see the timeline of my career, and that was, I started when I started making knives back in the 1980s. It was as tools. That's I mean, these are hunting knives, and my first sales, I go to gun shows, I'd set up, and these knives are being sold to hunters, and fishermen and outdoorsmen, and that was the main focus. The whole thing of collecting knives that we have now was not that way as much back then, especially when you're just starting out making knives. And so I was making knives in the stock removal method. Even though I was a blacksmith, I was making knives in the stock removal method. In other words, that's the taking a piece of steel, grinding away everything and don't look like a knife. That's kind of,
That's good.
you have a knife. And so that was kind of, it's funny because the first couple knives I made were actually forged knives, and I went to the stock removal method, and I was making knives like that. Well, I wanted to get back to forging knives, and because that was kind of like my my basis, as being a blacksmith. And so I started forging knives, and I found this knife maker, this bladesmith named Hugh Bartrig, and he's one of the really really top art knife makers in the industry. Even still, they have an award named after him, the Art Knife Award at the Blade Show. And anyway, so he helped me refine my craft of blacksmithing, bladesmithing, and he made art knives. And again, that was part of the artist in me. I was like, wow, this is really cool because the artistry in the steel itself, making Damascus and mokume and working with exotic materials and gold inlay and just on and on and on. And so I kind of went to making these really pretty knives. But the thing about it is, I was making art knives, but it was still my my idea or my passion of making using usable tools. It was still a knife.
Yeah.
It might be pretty, but you could still go out and gut a deer with it or whatever. Okay, you gold inlay, pearl. It's still a knife. I never lost the fact that even though these are really really pretty art knives, I never lost the fact that these are still tools. Because once it becomes pure art, as far as that, if that's their main focus, to me it's not a knife; it's sculpture.
Yeah.
So a knife is a knife. So if you take a knife, this functional tool that you can go out on a camping trip with, you can make it pretty, and then it's an art knife. But it still has to be a knife if you want to call it a knife. So that's just kind of a philosophy of.
I like that. That's utility first.
Absolutely.
If it has an artistic flair, if it looks pretty, if it's appealing, it has to be able to, like you said, gut a deer.
And perform at a very high level. And that's where, when you look at my knives now, you see that influence of the art part of it. And the influence is there because you can still make a very usable knife. But when you see the lines and everything, and when you look at one of my knives, you see these particular lines that we call them design elements. Even other knife makers, I can look and I can see a knife on the other side of the room and say, oh, that maker made that knife. I can tell because of the design elements. And so my design elements come from my usability part. So those lines, they're not just pretty lines. It's for the ergonomics of the handle. So it's a pretty looking knife. It's an art knife. There's art in it. But that art has a purpose. And the purpose is the usability of the knife.
So do you want to talk about the knives, these particular knives?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, so let's start with this one, this bad boy.
That's the Ranch Bowie.
This has a good weight to it. It's like the perfect weight.
Yeah, yeah. Again, it's the balance. You feel that you can take that knife out and use it all day at a campsite, and not, your hands aren't sore.
Yeah.
And you can carry it without. I like to test my knives. I used to do a lot of backcountry backpacking and canoe trips and everything. So I would always take my ideas with me. I would make a prototype knife, and let's take this and test it out. Sometimes I carry 3 or 4 knives on me.
Nice.
I'd be weighted down with knives. People are like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, I gotta test them. And one trip down at Linville Gorge, down in North Carolina, I believe North Carolina. But anyway, we did a 5 or 6 day backpacking trip down through the gorge, and that was the trip I wanted to test blade length on a camp knife, blade length and also thickness. And I had this one knife. It was a 8-inch blade. I'll never forget. It was an 8-inch blade camp knife, big honking thing. And yeah, I found out. Something? I almost just like dug a hole and buried it. I mean, it was that weight hanging off of my pack, and there was nothing that a 4-inch blade could not do that 8-inch blade. And so I found out then and there. It was a good tent stake because I pounded it in the ground. I did use it for that, but yeah, you have to, as a craftsman. I believe if you're making a product, you need to go out and test it. You need to find out. because that will influence your design on the usability of the knife. And the Ranch Bowie was one that I did that. We did that a lot, on the type of handle, the lines in the
Yeah.
handle, the underside of the handle, how your hand wraps around it. Can you be able to use that for push cuts really easy? Is it balanced enough that you can use the tip for caping out an elk, or so all these things go into that design. That's why when you pick it up, even if you're never going to use it for some of those, you pick it up and you're like, wow, that really feels great.
It's like a gun. The handle, if it don't feel right, it's not going to work for you.
Absolutely, absolutely. The grip angle on your carry pistol, I mean, it all matters.
This feels very good in my hands. It fits perfectly. I can tell you spend a lot of time really making sure it forms to a person's hands.
Yeah, and that's just the years and years of experience, and people say, well, you're successful, and I'm like, well, it could be longevity. I've been at it almost 40 years. So if after 40 years I don't have something in that, yeah, I better find another occupation. Better go back to shoeing horses. But no, seriously, it all, just years and years of testing and using these knives, building them, and knowing what materials to put into them, as well as, and again, it's not just taking a knife, a piece of steel, shaping it, putting an edge on it. You're actually, everything is factored into that. The length of the handle, the width of the handle, the depth, what kind of weight do we have in the handle, in relationship to the blade. And then the grinds on the blade. How are those grinds going to affect what you use the knife for? All of that goes into it. And the Ranch Bowie is actually one of our most popular models as far as our fixed blade.
I can see why. And there's also a design element that I noticed on your knives, and it's right here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like we're kind of thick here, and then you have like sort of a triangular element right there.
Yeah. It's a top bevel.
Okay, that's what that's called.
Yeah. That top bevel, I put that on a lot of my knives. It takes it takes a little bit of that weight out of the tip. You don't want a forward heavy blade, because you're
Gotcha.
going to be working more, especially with fine tasks, with that. So it helps with that. Is also it takes, if you're using that, for fine work, the tip, you're going to have that full thickness out at the tip like that. If you don't need that, it narrows it down a little bit so you can be able to get in some of those tight spots.
And these ridges here are so you can get your
Yeah, get a good grip on that. Yeah, and a
okay.
lot of that is not just when most of it is when the knife is wet. Okay,
Ooh,
because you can grip it without the jimping. We call it jimping. You can be able to grip it without it when the knife is dry. So you go to a knife show or a gun show and you're feeling these knives. You're like, wow, that feels good. I think that'll. But think about in your mind, especially if you're if you're butchering out an animal or skinning out or gutting a deer, when
yeah.
you're hunting, or even just when you're out, on a hike or a camping trip. A lot of times it's not it's not sunny every day and 80 degrees and perfectly dry. Think about when it's really muddy. And you're you go out on a 6-day hiking trip, camping trip, and it rains every day. It's going to be covered with mud. That's going to those jimping. That jimping is going to give you that extra, and that could be. And that really, without being dramatic, it could be a life or death situation, because you cut
Yeah.
yourself bad when you're out in the middle of nowhere. That turns into a really bad situation for you. So if that jimping helps a little bit in gripping that knife, it's huge. And I've had people tell me that. They're like, wow, I didn't realize it when I'm sitting at home,
Yeah.
feeling it. It's when you get out and you get a bunch of slime on it and stuff like that. That's when, that's why I tell my customers, please take my knives out and use them. That's when you really appreciate those lines and the design and everything that went into it. All the work that I did going into it, you'll be able to take advantage of that, if you use the knife, because that's how they were designed, foremost.
I like that. I feel like that goes under the category of like you are in an emergency, you default to your highest level of training,
Right.
or even your lowest level of training. Rather, that's what I meant to say. Your
Yeah.
lowest level of training.
Yeah. Yeah.
In
Yeah.
an emergency, you can really only do what you can do as quickly as possible.
Right, exactly, exactly. And that's really have defined a lot of my knives making and production. Is that, and I remember a long time ago, I was talking to a customer about warranty, and I told him, I said, of course I have a warranty on all my knives, but I want to make my knives to where you'll never honor that. I'll never have to honor that warranty because you make them good enough where we don't have that. Because when and my whole thing is when you're hanging off the side of a cliff and the knife breaks, guess what? You're not
Yeah.
really worried about the warranty at that time. You're not sitting there going, I wonder if this knife is covered. So and a lot of that, when I was on the fire department and everything, it's you have to your tool has to work at those times when you really need it, and
I love this leather too, by the way.
Yeah. Now, those we have our sheaths made. I used to make my own sheaths long time ago, but when I got into production, I can't make that many sheaths now.
Oh, I
So
bet.
we have a gentleman actually that helped me out years ago. He owns a little shop. He's an Amish craftsman. We live here in Northeast Ohio. We live in a really high Amish area. We have a lot of Amish families in our areas. Very, very. One of my best friends is an Amish horseman, and
Fantastic.
so we have a guy at Woodland Harness, and he does our sheaths for us. And wonderful, wonderful guy. And I can't say enough about everything. And sometimes I'm really making sheaths for knives is a little bit different than making harnesses for horses. And so a lot of times we go back and forth. And it's like we need to get it done just like this, and he's wonderful to work with on that, and he does a great job.
So how is that different? Or what differences are there in making a sheath to a harness?
Well, number one, the sheaths, especially the way I want them, they have to be very, very tough. When you're wearing them. So,
Gotcha.
again, it's all about usability when you're out. When you're out on a hike for 2 weeks or whatever. If you're hiking the Appalachian Trail, you're gonna be there for months. You want that sheath that's carrying your knife. You lose your knife, that's your life saving tool. So though, by telling them, okay, it has to be done this way, really beef it up, but it has to look fantastic. And that's the difference. Maybe they're doing horse, harnesses and especially in the Amish community, they're not looking at that, how it looks as much as the utility. So I kind of have to work with them. It's like, we want it to look great as well. So
Nice.
that's really about the only difference.
Okay, so we've got the Eclipse hollow grind.
Uh huh. Yeah. Yeah. And that, the
Oh,
hog grind is something new for
yeah,
us
that's cool.
in a production. In a production knife. The Eclipse is a design that I did. I'm trying to think of the year. I should, because it was the name came from a celestial event that year. It was not now just this last year we had a full eclipse, a total eclipse here at the shop here in Ohio. The year that I did that, I can't remember it was probably 5 years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. We had a partial eclipse, and I was actually at Gettysburg on horseback on the battlefield during that eclipse. Which
Wow.
that was, I mean, I tell you what, I didn't plan it that way, but talk about, I'm a huge history buff. And so, yeah, we were at Gettysburg. We did a horseback tour up in the wheat field. I don't know if you're familiar with the Gettysburg battlefield, but it was phenomenal right during the eclipse.
Is that where you had the idea, or that was the motivation for the
That was the
name?
motivation for the name.
Okay.
Yeah, my wife actually came up with that. She was like, "Well, let's call it the Eclipse," Because I'm like, "What am I gonna?" I'm not good at naming knives, and I've named a few. On the XM18, which is our flagship knife, that is actually XM is if you're familiar with military jargon, that's experimental model. in military jargon, and then 18 was my badge number on the fire department. So
That's cool.
yeah, back then, because I wasn't good at naming knives, all my knives had fire term names.
Nice.
Flashover was one of the names, and and I'm like, I got to the XM18, and because the XM18 actually came from a design that I called the Flame. And I'm like, what am I going to call this? And I'm like, oh, it was kind of an experiment how I built the knife. I'm like, I'll call it XM, and then I don't know, my fire department number. It's still fire.
That's cool.
Yeah, but the Eclipse came from from that, and it was a little bit different design from some of my other knives at the time. Uh, that's a design that also was a collaboration with Zero Tolerance with Kershaw. So
Nice.
they also made that design in a 0392 is what their name for the knife was. They do numbers, so that that design has a lot of miles under it now.
So on this part right here, the 3, is that the tri-pivot? Is
That's
that what
the
that
Triway. That's the Triway.
tri-way?
Yeah,
Sorry.
yeah. That's our logo for the Triway system.
Man,
And
I love the, and then you got your logo there, and then the H.
yeah. The H stands for the hollow grind. So that was
Okay.
that's a new thing for us in our production. Almost all of our other knives for years has been flat ground in a production sense, and so again, I'm always looking at advancing cutability and what you're using the knife for. And the one grind that I do is called the slicer grind, and it is more designed and engineered for what I named it, slicer, for slicing. So it's more, it's a little thinner behind the edge. The angles, the way that the grind comes down from the top of the knife is more of a slight slope. So in other words, it slices. It's something that you would take if you think of slicing like a tomato. Okay, it's more engineered, designed for that. Not really slicing tomatoes, but you kind of get my point. It's more of a
Yeah.
slicing. Whereas like the Spanto is a thicker. The tip is a little thicker. Now it also, of course, it slices, but it's made for more. Where if you had to pry with it. Okay, so those are the different.
I see it. That's
Yeah, you can kind
cool.
of see, especially when you look down on the top of it.
Yeah, that's really cool.
So the slicer grind was a grind that was more for that. So I in my head I'm thinking, how can we get it even more sliceability? In other words, have it even more of a kind of a slicing aptitude. And I knew that the hollow grind would do that, would give that little bit less bulk behind the edge, to where your slicing ability would be just enhanced a little bit. However, I didn't want it to be a complete, real deep hollow grind, because you're also taking out a little bit of the toughness out of the blade. So we came up with a very slight hollow, and that gives you a little bit more percentage wise of slicing ability in that blade profile, but yet you still have some of the toughness behind the edge that you don't have to worry about chipping or snapping the tip.
Boy, you really know what you're talking about.
It's just almost 40 years of doing this, and I'm a knife geek.
I love it.
I not only make knives, I design knives, I engineer knives, but I collect knives. I love knives. Ever since I went into that hardware store in Wisconsin when I was a kid, and I bought my first pocket knife.
Dude, what kind of pocket knife was it?
It was a two-bladed K-bar. It was a K-bar knife,
Wow, okay.
and it was made by K-bar. But it was a two-bladed. I can't remember the exact what they call but yeah.
How old were you at the time?
I think I was 10 years old. And what's crazy is, all of us, we have these memories that are like, I might not be able to remember what I ate yesterday for dinner, but I can remember exactly what the inside of that hardware store looked like when I was 10 years old. And if I was in that store right now, I can probably tell you exactly where that knife case was that I walked up to, and I was like, wow,
Have you been back there?
I've never, no, no, never been back there
Where
since.
was it?
I'm sorry.
Where was it in Ohio?
No, it was in Wisconsin.
Oh, okay.
Portage, I believe it was Portage, Wisconsin. Is
That's
where he
cool.
lived. Not that far from Wisconsin Dells, actually. Was Which is a very well known tourist area. And that was, and really that short amount of time that I was in Wisconsin, and I mean I was one of those rural kids that I loved fishing. I mean, I was always out finding a fishing hole. I loved hunting. I loved all of that. Get me out in the woods. That's where I wanted to be. And Wisconsin, at the time, that was like the perfect place. I was living my childhood dream really, because I was out constantly with my knives and everything, and yeah, walking into the store and buying that. Who would have known when I was picking out that knife? What uh, the road God would have taken me. You know, it's really. I mean, I think He led me in that store and said, "Hey, you're going up to that cabinet. Go buy one of these knives."
I love those moments because there's that memory because I have some memories like that as well. There's kind of a glow when you think back to
Yeah,
those memories.
yeah,
They're like those key moments that are like, okay, this was written. This was supposed to happen. God
yeah.
guided you along, and these were the key moments.
Absolutely, absolutely. I had no choice in the matter.
Yeah, I love that.
That
Thank
DNA,
God.
yeah, yeah, that DNA was put there long before I was even thought of. So it's really neat when you look back and there's so much I don't know, poignant evidence that points to that. It's like I can't explain it, And then you have all these moments since that up to where I'm at now, that it all makes sense. It's all pieces of a puzzle that just went together.
I like that evidence. I like that you use that word because that's really what it feels like.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I- there again. There's nothing I probably could have done about it. This is what I was born to do, thank God for for giving me this this ability in this life, and it's been a wonderful, wonderful road, and the horses were thrown in too. For many years I kind of I got out of horses. I was out of horses for there was a time period, and I found out 3 years ago that once a horseman, always a horseman.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
we got this bad boy. This might be my, and it's a tough choice, but this might be my favorite of the three.
yeah, yeah. Uh, is that that's the
Scar-
XM18? I'm looking at it. I'm not sure what Taylor's saying,
Sorry,
but yeah, that's the XM18, 3.5 inch, I think, or the 3 inch.
that I do not know.
Facing on, it looks like might be the 3 inch.
I like the two. I like the coloring on it
Yeah,
on
yeah.
the handle.
Yeah, and that's that make it your own deal. That's what
Yeah,
even when we make our knives here, here at Rick Hinderer Knives, we have a wonderful, wonderful staff of assemblers, and they a lot of them are really craftsmen, artists in their own right. We give them latitude to when they're assembling these knives to make some don't put just the regular stuff, put some anodized standoffs. And again, it's like when the customer gets it, they look at it, it's like, wow, this is special. This is wow, it's got blue accents. It's it makes it something a little bit different. So when you show it to somebody, they're like, wow, that's really cool. And then you can take and get some different things to put in it. Next week you have a totally new knife. So, and again, it's I got a big shout out, kudos to my crew here. If it wasn't for the absolute fantastic crew that I have here, it would be really tough. I'd be wore down to the bone. Because that's me still making a lot of knives. I wouldn't be able to ride horses as much as I do now if it was.
oh, yeah. You gotta have the crew, man. You gotta have the crew.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that is really that's the secret. The secret of Rick Hinderer Knives and our success is the people behind it. Because I can't do it all. And they, I taught them exactly what I expect, and their levels are phenomenal. Their levels of performance, or levels of craftsmanship, is really phenomenal. They are in touch with what makes our knives special, and they're really hard to, they do not let anything get by them.
No, oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, yeah. We have a really, from the assembler that actually assembles the knives, even the shop floor, because we make all of the parts for our knives here, right here, in house. And
That was one of the biggest questions I was going to ask about the U.S. made aspect.
yes, yes, yes. The U.S. made aspect. There's a lot that goes into USA made. Why USA made? Why? And there's a lot of the usual. Well, the quality, support your local. Of course, I believe wholeheartedly in that. But really, when you start thinking about USA made, it goes. To me, for me, it goes even deeper than that. When you buy a USA made product, and why you want to support USA made, a lot of the ingenuity and the craftsmanship, the design, the advancements in the knife industry come from the U.S. And you think about that. There's a lot of knives and decent knives that come in from overseas, but that's all technology that originated in the United States. And we need to foster that. We need to foster that when you support USA Made, not only are you getting the best in quality, you're supporting your fellow citizen in great jobs and in livability, but you're also supporting that innovation. That innovation for the future. You're supporting those makers, those designers, and those engineers that are crafting the next perfect knife. And you're supporting that, and that's what really, by supporting USA Made, you're getting that. And especially like in our knives, we make everything here. Everything that when you buy that knife, everything in that knife was engineered, was designed, was made by American hands right here. I don't have to go down or look at the a sale page online and say, well, okay, I'm going to buy those, and those are going to go into the knives. I don't know where those came from. I don't know, what's their level of quality.
Yeah.
And I don't have to worry about that if I make them here. And we demand such a high level of precision and quality that we can only be able to do it here. Because of the fact that we know what went into it. I can go talk to Mike on the shop floor, and he can tell me about, hey, this is what we're doing right now, and I know the tools that went into the a milling machine that actually made that part, and the tools that I buy are the best that you can get. So all of that goes in to the end product. And so when you're getting a Rick Hinderer knife, you're getting all of that. There's so much behind it that people don't see, but they feel when they pick up the knife.
You can tell. This is not a factory knife.
Yeah. And that's why I kind of try to explain to people when they ask me, well, why should I buy one of your knives over, what I can buy at Walmart or something like that? And that's a valid question. I mean, the price is different than some of the knives coming in, overseas. And, so what are you getting? Each one cuts. So what are you getting? So when I explain all of that, and sometimes it takes me an hour or two because there's so much into it, without even getting into the historical part of it, and people are like, oh God, don't let Rick get started on history.
Oh, I love it.
It's all of that goes into this product. So when you set that knife in front of a customer, especially I love the new customers that don't really, they aren't the knife enthusiasts, that maybe already know custom knives and the high-end knives and stuff like that. I like to get these guys that come in. It's like when I was sitting up at a gun show in Medina, Ohio in 1991, and nobody knew the internet. The internet was around back then, but I don't think definitely not like it is today. And so I would get that person who would come in the door and walk by the table, and they'd look at the knives, and then they'd see the price and like, oh my gosh, And then I would get to explain a lot more because back then, they didn't have those avenues to where they can find a custom knife maker. And I would explain all this to them as they're holding the knife, and you would see that enlightenment just come over their face. And then they would purchase the knife, and they'd come back 2 months later and tell me about how they dressed out 10 deer,
Yeah, yeah.
theirs and all their buddies, and never had to touch the edge. And then
Wow.
that enlightenment would come back, and I'm like, that's what you paid for. And the other thing that I like to put in there, because I'm a big proponent of this, is pride of ownership.
Oh, yep. Yeah,
You
absolutely.
know, and it's that unseen thing that when you purchase it, you're holding it like, yeah, I got this. This was made by Amanda at Rick Hinderer Knives. Because we have assembly cards that go with each knife, so who built the knife. And this knife was made by Amanda or Kim or Lane and that's really cool. It's that connection to it, and connection to the craftsman that actually built it. But you're getting even more behind it. You're getting all of that behind it. You're getting Mike that milled the blade. You're getting Zach that water jetted. You're getting all of those unseen craftsmen, behind it, and it's that pride of ownership. Like, this is a Rick Hinder knife. This isn't a gas station knife. It came from
Oh, yeah.
China. It's actually, this is really so it's that pride of ownership. I think that is also, you have to factor that in.
I've been testing these guys on everything, and with the ranch, I was like,
Yeah.
let me cut some carrots, and it was like cutting through water. And I looked down. It's a thick wooden cutting board, and there was a line.
Yeah. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
went in there, and I didn't even really have to move my hand very much.
Yeah, it is. A lot of that's the ergonomics of the blade. And that's what it should be. That when I go back to that, you don't want the knife to work against you. It's a tool.
Yeah.
You want it to work with you or make that job easier. So when you see that, that's the design in a knife. That's why I want my customers to use these knives, because those are the things that you paid for. Those are the things that you get in a knife designed like that. You get that. Wow, it was a whole lot easier to do this task with this knife than it was this other knife. So,
and cutting steaks. I was cutting some steaks the other day, and nothing.
Yeah.
It was like slicing through butter.
Yeah, exactly. And that's all of those things. And again, especially when you're sitting down to a really good ribeye, you're not really, you're going like, oh man, this is going to be good. You're not really thinking, okay, I'm going to cut this steak, and I'm going to think about how the blade is cutting through through the meat and everything. You're like, I just want to get that first bite in my mouth. And then it's always afterwards like, oh wow, after your belly's full, it's like, oh wow, that was actually a lot easier to cut that steak than it was, those steak knives that I bought from Home Depot or whatever.
Oh yeah. Rick, you're a joy to talk to, man. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that I should ask you?
I can't think about it. It's there's a whole lot of things. We could be here for 4 hours.
That's what I love about this. We could easily, and I'll catch you at a knife show or something, and we can sit down and just chat.
Absolutely. Yeah, we could talk history. That's my other passion. That really.
Oh man, I love it.
Yeah. I'm actually, I went back to on a personal note. I went back to college, and but as a caveat, I'm auditing classes.
Congrats, man!
Actually, in university, we're American political thought. That's what this this past year has been. So you can imagine what that's it's actually a really fun class.
What a year to take that class!
I know, right?
That's fantastic.
It kind of, I started over a year ago, and this organization that's attached to Ashland University is called the Ashbrook Center, and which was started by a politician named John Ashbrook, and actually inaugurated by President Reagan.
Wow.
And it's a really it's a scholar program for a lot of young students coming in. and so we learn only from primary documents. So
Fantastic.
when we're studying early American history, we actually ask the founders. Instead of learning from a textbook
Yes.
or reading from a textbook that was written by somebody that was their opinion.
Yeah.
We're actually, it's like, well, what did Thomas Jefferson say about this issue? Well, let's ask Thomas Jefferson. And it's a
That's the best
conversation.
way to do it.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It's not like, well, is that really true of what I'm reading? Well,
Yeah.
yeah, because this is what Thomas Jefferson actually said. And so yeah, the first class was Democracy in America. That was a really interesting class, and that was
Fantastic.
the founding principles and stuff like that. And I've always been a history buff ever since I was in second grade. And that was my other avenue that I could have went down that I didn't. And I'm perfectly happy. Again, God told me I was going to be a knife maker. Uh, he said you could do this as a hobby.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fun.
And so yeah, so we learned things about the founding principles of this of our great country that I didn't even know, which I think is must education for Americans.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Next time we'll talk history.
There you go. You go.
We'll focus on history.
You got it.
Rick, it's been a true pleasure, man. I really enjoyed chatting with you.
It was great. I appreciate you bringing me on, and if you ever want to talk knives again, just let me know. There's still a lot of things that we didn't get to.
Oh, I love it. That's the way it should be, man.
Absolutely. Never-ending conversation.
I love it.
And my wife says I'm not afraid to talk.
Oh, good. No, man. People who are afraid to talk scare me.
Exactly. I'll tell you exactly what I think instead of the one that just keep it inside.
Oh, it's great, man. Well, my mouse isn't working here, but I'll stop it in a second. Man, that was great. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. And yeah. If anything else you need, just let me know.
Well, man, your whole team has been a real joy to work with.
I tell you what, it's I can't say enough that having a great team, not only in the shop floor, the assemblers, my general manager Sam, Taylor, who you've been working with, on that side, they're all just phenomenal. I'm very blessed to be able to have. I wouldn't even say coworkers. They're pretty much they're part of the family.
I love that.
And I think of them that way, and they are so passionate about what I do. They've taken my dream, they've taken my enthusiasm for the business, and just gone with it. They made it their own.
I love it. That's how you can. That's a good team right there, man.
Yeah. Absolutely.
All right, I'll let you get back to.
Yeah, I'll do that. And thanks a bunch, and hopefully you can be able to. We couldn't get on, but now you probably can't get off.
Oh, I don't want to. So this usually takes about a month. So
okay.
And then I'll have some questions I'll send to Taylor.
Okay.
Along the way, just random questions, usually timeline related.
Right.
And then we'll get it out. We'll do it. We'll put this out as video, and then we'll have audio, and then it'll be like a profile of you and the company.
Okay. Well, fantastic. Well, I really appreciate it. I can't wait to see the finished product, and yeah, and hopefully we'll do something again, and someday, and I'll run into you at a show or something. And
I'm looking forward to it, Rick.
And if you ever find yourself in Ohio or wanting to come to Ohio, and I know a lot of people are like, why would you want to go to Ohio? But I tell you what, you have an open invitation to come by the shop.
I'd love to, man. If I'm anywhere near there, I'll make sure to.
Oh, absolutely. I have a museum that you would really, I'm sure you would really enjoy seeing of historical artifacts, and if you like riding horses, I can get you on a horse.
Oh, I love it. It's a deal.